Okay, with the absence of the mayor this evening, I will call the October 24th, 2022 City Council meeting to order. And let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I believe today we've got our invocation from Rob Griepentrog from the Onsite International Prayer.
Let's pray. Father, we love you and thank you for the opportunity tonight to come before you in this public setting to seek you, to seek your best, for you are our best. And throughout the history of Westfield, we have seen your hand working in ways great and small. And Father, tonight I ask that we would all see your hand at work again tonight in ways great and small as well. Many things being considered, many things being questioned, many things being adopted, amended, and so forth. I ask, Lord, you would give our counselors and all who are here tonight your wisdom, your joy to strengthen them, and as well your grace as we interact, as we seek the best for Westfield now and in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead. Father, you have paved the way for these times that we live, and we are thankful for the many, many, many great things that you have brought into our lives and how you've brought each of us here over the years. Father, as we go forward tonight, I pray that the words of our hearts and the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts would be or become pleasing to you if they're not there at this time already. We seek your best, for you are our best. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you for your blessing, Rob. Cindy Gossard, would you note the presence of a quorum, please?
Oh, Troy Patton,
Here.
Jake Gilbert,
Here.
Mike Johns,
Here.
Scott Fry,
Here.
Cindy Spalgeric,
Here.
Joe Edwards,
Here.
Scott Willis.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Cindy. First item for this evening would be approval of the minutes for the minutes for October 10th, 2022. Councilors, do you have any questions or changes to those minutes? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes for October 10th, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Wills, seconded by Councilor Edwards. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear who made the motion.
Councilor Willis made the
Okay.
motion. Councilor Edwards seconded.
Thank you. Troy Patton,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Scott Willis.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. The next item is the approval of the minutes from our October 19th, 2022 meeting. Councilors, do you have any questions regarding those minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 19th, 2022 meeting?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Patton, seconded by Councilor Spalgeric. Would you call the roll, please?
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Next item this evening is the approval of the claims docket for October 24th, 2022. Councilors, do you have any questions or comments regarding the claims docket this evening? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the claims docket for October 24th, 2022?
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Councilor Patton, seconded by Councilor Fry. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Troy Patton.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. First item on our agenda then this evening will be a special presentation, a proclamation on the Hindu Heritage Month, and Pooja Garg will be accepting the proclamation. In the mayor's absence, our Director of Communications, Chris Prophet, is going to handle the proclamation.
Pooja Garg up here. Pooja is a Hamilton County resident. Pooja, come on up. While she comes on up here and her family joins us, come on up, everyone. Today is the beginning of Diwali, which is known as the Festival of Lights and one of the most important festivals within Hinduism. Hello, sir. Hello. Nice to have you here. Generally lasts about 5 days. It is a very important celebration, and so we're happy that you and your family can join us today. This is a Hindu Heritage Month proclamation. October of this year, 2022, marks the observance of Hindu Heritage Month. Hinduism is the third largest religion in the world, and with 1 billion devotees worldwide, there are 4 million in the United States. Hindu heritage, culture, and tradition serve as a source of inspiration, reflection, and contemplation for the millions of people who look to the teachings of Hinduism for guidance, and our vibrant Hindu American community has contributed tremendously to the vitality of the city of Westfield and the state of Indiana by enriching our lives and its citizens. During the month of October, the Hindu community across the state of Indiana, across our great nation, will collectively celebrate its heritage by focusing on its culture and the diverse spiritual traditions rooted in India. Therefore, be it resolved, the city of Westfield, Indiana recognizes and celebrates Hindu Heritage Month. And also resolved, the city of Westfield calls upon our citizens to recognize the importance of the Hindu American community in our city and state and all of the contributions that have been made throughout our history. In witness thereof, I'm doing it on behalf of Mayor Cook. He has signed this proclamation. J. Andrew Cook, City of Westfield. I'll present it to you. Would you like to say anything? Pooja?
Thank you.
Family. Absolutely. John, can you snap a photo for us? She's very busy. Yeah.
There we go. Smarter than the camera. Thank you.
Next item tonight, we will move on to old business. The first item under old business will be Resolution 22118, confirming declaration of a certain area within the city of Westfield an economic revitalization area. This item had a council introduction on September 12th, and we'll be having a public hearing this evening, followed by adoption consideration. Kai Chuck, our Director of Economic Development, will be talking to us.
Thank you. Good evening, councilors. For the record, Kai Chuck, Economic Development Department, to present the confirmation of the economic revitalization area for 18th Street Development / Next Core Companies. This is for location of a 60,000 square foot, $34 million Class A medical office building. This investment will create 32 new jobs, located at 535 Park Street, Westfield, Indiana. The petitioners are here, but do not plan to present. They themselves and myself will be here to answer any questions from.
Thank you, Kai. That being said, we have to have a public hearing this evening. I'll open the public hearing at 7:10. Jeremy, do we have any cards? Or I'm sorry, Kevin?
No cards.
Okay, let's give it about 30 seconds here to see if anyone calls in. Okay, it's 7:11. I'll close the public hearing. Counselors, do you have any questions on Resolution 22-118? Hearing none, do I have a motion for adoption?
Motion to approve Resolution 22-118.
Do I have a
I'll
second?
second that.
Second.
Motion made by Counselor Patton, seconded by Counselor Willis. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Cindy Spalcherik,
yes,
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Troy Patton.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Moving on, our next item, Resolution 22-120, the Common Council of the City of Westfield, Indiana, regarding certain tax abatement deductions for New Pitch LLC, Sagility. Again, this had a council introduction of October 10th. It is up for adoption consideration this evening. Kai Chuck will explain this resolution to us.
Thank you, councilors. Again, Kai Chuck for the Economic Development Department, here to present tax abatement for real property for a New Pitch LLC, which operates Agility Soccer Development in Westfield. The location is 16500 South Park Ave Drive. This is approximately 13,000 square feet on 3 acres, a $2.5 million investment. It will create 2 new jobs by retaining 4 jobs currently in Westfield. The 2 new jobs will be at $23 per hour. The abatement is for 5 years on real property at 30% flat for the 5 years. The estimated value at the end of the 5 years will be $75,000. The company's principal, Sherry McGrath, is online to present a short presentation on the company. Herself and myself will be available for any questions afterwards.
Thank you. Sherry, you're on.
oh, hello, everybody. Thank you for letting me present again. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, very good. Gosh, I honestly didn't know I was presenting tonight. I thought I was just going to be here to answer questions. So, do you need me to present anything?
No.
Sherry, you
Went through
really,
everything last week or 2 weeks ago. Okay.
it's always good to hear from you, but you really don't have to speak tonight.
Okay.
You got to
Thank
buy.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Any councilor comments, questions on this resolution?
I'm not voting tonight because my wife and I helped them with their books, taxes, everything when Chris passed. So I don't want to be, have a conflict of interest there.
Okay,
So,
all right. Hearing no other questions, do I have a motion on resolution 22-120?
so moved.
Second that.
Motion made by Counselor Edwards, seconded by Counselor Fry for approval. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Troy Patton.
I'm-
You just said you're not.
I'm not voting or whatever.
Okay. Scott Fry,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Cindy Spalcherik,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Joe Edwards.
Yes.
Motion carries 6, 1 abstain.
Thank you. Thank you, Kai.
councilors.
Excellent. Next item, ordinance 22-48, additional appropriation. This ordinance had a council introduction on October 10th, and it is up for consideration this evening. It also requires a public hearing, but before we do that, we're going to let, I guess, Jeremy Lawler. Jeremy, you out there?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm here.
Are you going to go ahead and kind of give us an idea, a description of this ordinance?
Sure will. So for the record, Jeremy Lawler, and I apologize, I can't be present this evening. But this ordinance was introduced to you, specifically ordinance 22-48 for additional appropriation was introduced to you all a couple weeks ago. Per your request, we modified the ordinance to only include 2 items. One being design for the beginning of design for Station 84, what will be the next fire station, and the second being designed for the police headquarters. The additional appropriation is in the amount of $495,416, both being appropriated from general fund dollars that will allow us to begin design on both of those projects. And I'm happy to answer any further questions that you might have.
Counselor, questions?
I have one. Section 2 was not updated to reflect the change since the last time we saw this, so it still says administrative employee salary and benefits, legal fees incurred, the rest of that language. So I think that we should, if we're going to keep Section 2 at all, it should end at cities, fire, and police departments.
Thank you, Councilor Spelteric. I apologize. Per the council's request, I modified this ordinance, and it's clear that I'm not an attorney, so I must have missed that, but you could include that in your motion. Should we get there, that would be adequate, and we'll get that modified.
And again, Jeremy, my only comment on this was that it just seems to me that we're going through this process unnecessarily. This being the end of October, it's hard for me to believe that we'll receive any invoices that we would have to pay before year's end. But certainly we want to approve the funds. I just don't know that they're necessary, but if you feel they are?
I do feel they are, because they're not, these dollars specifically are not included in the budget you'll consider later on this evening. Plus it gives us 2 full months of work time on both projects.
Okay. Councilors, any other questions? Do I have a motion? Cindy, would you
Motion
like-
to approve ordinance 22-48
With the
with the changes, with the modifications Cindy Spoljarek said.
Okay. With the removal of any verbiage after police departments in section 2.
I'll second that
Okay, motion.
with the modification.
Motion made by Counselor Patton, seconded by Counselor Fry.
I think we need a hearing.
There's
There's a hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have a public hearing.
Oh, I thought we did that last time.
No, was there, right? And I guess I thought we had a less time too, but we will, before we take our vote, we will open the floor to a public hearing. I'll open the floor at 7:18. Kevin?
I thought it
No
was
cards.
last time too. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have it, but
Yeah, I did
that's fine.
too. but- Okay, we will close the public hearing at 7:19. Again, I've got a motion then from Counselor Patton, seconded by Counselor Fry, with the changes made. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Okay, Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Cindy Spalteric,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
No?
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Troy Patton.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1.
The next item this evening is ordinance 22-43, our 2023 budget. This item had a council introduction on October 10th, 2022. We had a public hearing on it on October 10th, 2022. We had a follow-up council meeting to discuss it, make changes to it on October 19th, 2022, and it is up for adoption consideration this evening. Jeremy, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, councilors. Mike, you introduced it pretty well. Sorry, Councilor Johns, you introduced it pretty well. Since our last meeting, we spent several hours making the modifications that you all requested to the budget, which was inclusive of the 4% cost of living. We did all the calculations to make that adjustment. We, one thing that did come up on that, several folks, department heads and otherwise, heard the conversation about the extra 1% as being different than I did. We did confirm that with Counselor Johns on Thursday afternoon as we were fixing that. So some folks thought that it was 4% plus 1% of discretionary increase dollars. I heard it as 4% plus the already proposed discretionary dollars. So that's the way we left it. We also reduced the fire salary by 25%, as we had talked, to approve, I guess, the hiring of the firefighters starting April 1st as opposed to January 1st. We made the reductions in the medical dental lines to coincide with the increase of 6.57%, which is what we are expecting to renew at. And then there were a series of other smaller changes that were all requested at that last meeting. So I believe our total reduction was just under $1.3 million. I do believe that there were a few other changes that were made today that I was not a party to. So it may be a greater deduction than that, but I would defer to the clerk on that if there were other additional changes. And with that, I will turn over to questions.
I have one question. Are we opened up for questions?
All right, I spent some time today at the clerk's office reviewing the corrected budget. We found a couple issues which we made changes to and corrected this today. I've got one other issue that I'd like the council to consider and get input from our councilors here. Within our budget that's approved for next year are 4 positions that have already been approved and are not filled. Those positions include a guest services representative, city engineer, and an infrastructure inspector, and associate planner. These positions total $254,500 in salary. Jeremy, do you know when these positions, you have any candidates that have already been approved for any of these 4 positions?
No, we are actively pursuing new hires for all of those positions, specific to the city engineer, all 4 of them. We've been pursuing those replacements for quite some time now. They are absolutely essential to get those filled as soon as possible.
I'd like to just make a recommendation to the council that we take those positions that obviously they're in the budget, we expect them to be in the budget, but that we remove those funds from the budget with the caveat that as soon as those positions are filled on a one-by-one basis, we would appropriate those funds. And the reason being that if for some reason none of those funds or none of those positions were filled next year at this time, we'd be sitting here with $254,000 of unexpensed salary within our budget. And so I think it might be easier just to approve the budget without those funds and then appropriate them as they become filled.
Councilor Johns, I'm going to have to disagree with you on that. So those positions were all approved from last year. They have either vacated or we've been pursuing filling those. To have to come back for an additional appropriation to hire those people is very inconvenient, but also delays our ability to hire in an expedient manner. There's no intention to leave them vacant. Any open positions are actively being pursued. I don't see a value in us adding extra paperwork and extra processes to hire people that are already approved.
Hey, Jeremy, this is Troy. I don't have a problem with what you're saying. And I mean, I hear what Mike's saying too. Those
that 250,000, and maybe Jonathan or John can even talk to this. The 250,000 is the worry that we are going to spend it and not on the people that we're saying, correct?
That's a concern.
Okay, so, can we, I'm just trying to think through it. Can we approve if we approve the budget under the auspices, that the only way those dollars are spent are on those spots?
Specific.
As opposed to making sure that $250,000 doesn't get put through as pay increases, seeing as how, hey, we weren't able to fill them, and then get a 4% on top of that. I think that's the kind of the idea.
Is that reasonable?
Yeah?
What I was just going to say is that from a hiring perspective, if I'm going to go to the trouble of finding a city engineer, have them agree to come to the city of Westfield and work here, I'm going to have to tell that person, you're hired pending council approval of appropriation, additional dollars for appropriation. That just seems very cumbersome. We have a hard enough time trying to recruit people to the city of Westfield. To say it's, by the way, you're hired contingent on council approval, I think is unfair and very cumbersome in a recruiting process.
Well, I would not call it condescending, and I'm not going to argue that point now.
Yeah.
I would say we've got an issue here, perhaps lack of trust. We're only asking that you spend the money on the appropriated for positions. And if those positions aren't filled in 6 months, and then at the end, and they all get filled in 6 months, and at the end of the year, half of this money should remain and for the following year's budget and not be spent for any other reason in the salary line. Is that responsible?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Johns and Councilor Patton. I appreciate what you're saying. I agree with Councilor Patton. If you guys want to approve it with some sort of contingency there, I think that's completely acceptable.
Yeah.
I hope that we've moved beyond the trust issue, but you also get to control these things via the salary ordinance as well as, just general other financial operations. So, yeah, if it makes you all feel more comfortable to approve it with that contingency, I'm comfortable with that.
I wouldn't term it contingency though, Jeremy. I would just have it approve the budget as is, right? It's not, the money's not contingent on anything, it's there. I would just direct it to be put in maybe a sub-salary line that would go toward those individual positions.
Okay.
So that way you know exactly that those are appropriated for that purpose and they couldn't be used for anything else.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I just don't want the word contingency to be used in a budget approval. That's my only concern.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilor.
Yeah,
Jeremy,
thank you,
is that
Patty. I
workable?
appreciate it. Yeah, it is completely workable,
Okay.
and that's why you don't allow me to speak without reviewing my words.
Thank you, Jeremy, thank you. Before we get to further into the budget, I just want to make a statement that we as a city council, we really value our city employees and what you do for the city. We currently have 94 civilian employees who, other than our fire and police, and we think that those folks do an excellent job for us. That's one of the reasons why in the budget we've put forth there is that 4% cost of living increase. And I would also point out that the additional $158,000 that's in the budget for discretionary bonuses and stipends, that amounts to another, on average, $1,680 per person, or roughly, if everybody gets an equal amount, would be another 2% if distributed equally. So we value what you do. We're doing the best we can to compensate you for those things. When we look at the budget, approving a budget, it's always a delicate balance act. And again, I want to thank the council and the administration for their time in working on the current 2023 budget. For our residents in Westfield, because of our state tax structure, most of you are going to see your own property taxes going up 10 to 20% this year. If there was anything that I could do to lower those taxes, I would do that. We talked at length about possibly trying to reduce our tax rate. But if we were to do that, we, the citizens of Westfield, would not receive a reduction in the taxes that you pay. We would just reduce our rate, and those taxes that you've paid would go to other communities around our state. So unfortunately, we're not able to do that. What we are able to do is to use our best efforts to make sure that your tax dollars that flow to our city are used to the best of our ability and to the greatest importance to you. So I think that, and as I looked into it over the last couple of weeks, I kind of looked toward history, people that I respect, and I know that Ronald Reagan said that government always finds a need for whatever money it gets. And I had heard some people in the administration just say that we got a great year coming up. We've got plenty of the money in the budget, plenty of money to do whatever we choose to do. And I would just suggest to you that I'm glad that we have additional funds in the budget this year, because Westfield is one of the, and it's not one, Westfield is the fastest growing community in the in the state of Indiana. We have great needs that accompany that growth. We have great needs in our safety area, in our fire department, our police department, in our administration. And we've got to use our best efforts as a city council to take those funds and use them to the best of our efforts for the benefit of all people. So we want to treat, and we're trying to treat our employees fairly. We're also trying to treat our residents fairly, and we're going to try to take those funds and use them to the best of our ability to build new infrastructure, roads, and add to the police department, add to the fire department. So that's the goal. And councilors, before we vote on the budget, that was my comments. I open the floor to any
I
of you
just
too.
have one comment if I could. No, actually a question. We talked a little bit about this last week, and I know Chief Gaylord was unavailable for a lot of good reasons. Pushing back the hiring till April 1st. You guys are in a business where seconds matter. It can be the difference between life or death. I'm all for saving the money. I think that's a good, responsible thing to do, but I don't want to do it at the cost of our citizens. Do you feel comfortable pushing that back would not impact your operations?
To be honest, the whole process for us when it comes to hiring personnel takes a lot of time to get them through our state pension. So it's going to take us until March to get them approved. Then it takes a process to get them through our HR and committed and actually on, so they won't hit the books until about April anyway. Even if we were to hire today, we have background checks and a couple interviews and some other things that we still have to do. We carry a list. We're talking about some new recruits. And on the average, over the last 15, 20 years, it's been roughly 5 or 6 people on the list to get one candidate to hire. So we have our work to do, and it'll take us the first quarter to get there. So I'm absolutely comfortable with the presentation that you guys have come up with.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Chief Keller. Councilors, any other comments?
Councilor Johns, I do have a comment before we vote, if you don't mind. Based on the statistics you just gave, you did calculations on 94 or 96 civilian employees. I just want to remind everyone that we have 252 employees, and based on that math, it doesn't take into consideration our police and fire, and or any potential adjustments for them in that 1% that we talked about. I keep hearing the 94 to 96
Civilian.
employees. We have 252 employees, civilian or otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Councilors, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve ordinance 22-43.
Second.
Okay, is that motion to approve with the sub-salary line
Right.
being added toward those specific 4 positions as
Yep.
discussed? Okay. Motion made by Counselor Patton, seconded by Counselor Edwards. Cindy, would you please call the vote?
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Troy Patton.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Moving on to our next item, ordinance 22-44, establishing a policy for reporting capital assets. This item had a council introduction on October 10th, is up for adoption consideration this evening, and I believe Martha Ayler from our clerk's treasurer's office is going to present this to us.
Good evening, councilors. Just briefly to remind you, Marla Ayler, Project Research in the Clerk Treasurer's Office. We had established a capital assets policy in 1999 that was unfortunately never recorded, so we do not have one that is codified. The Clerk Treasurer is required to make a capital assets report to the DLGF every year. SBOA considers any kind of policy that helps control inventory and the assets of the city, internal controls. Mr. Hersig and I did, through email, took his suggestions into consideration and had modified that policy based on his suggestions largely. Those changes have been made. There is probably 2 words missing, which I would recommend maybe we just amend the very last page of the policy to include the city attorney, if necessary. That's kind of my understanding after a brief chat. Also, the ordinance that is listed, 2245, I handed you a printed version of that. Unfortunately, we attached an old version, so the new one that you're looking at is the modified version that Mr. Webster worked on for the Clerk Treasurer's Office. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them where I can. Otherwise, I realize it's a lot to kind of take in, but it's basic reporting policy that our office does anyway.
Okay, well, let's, Ms. Ayler, let's hold to ordinance 2244 first before we get into
Sure.
45.
Sure.
Okay. Councilors, do you have any questions then regarding ordinance 2244, establishing a policy for reporting of capital assets?
Motion to approve ordinance 22-44, establishing a policy for reporting capital assets.
Second.
Cindy, a motion was made by Councilor Gilbert, seconded by Councilor Patton. Would you call the roll, please?
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, our next item then is ordinance 22-45, the amending materiality threshold and establishing a reporting policy. This ordinance, again, had a council introduction on October 10th. It's up for adoption consideration this evening. Hey, Ms. Ayler, any comments on this ordinance?
So the last page of the actual policy is applicable to this particular ordinance. We really didn't, the materiality threshold has not changed from $5,000. What did change is a policy on how any variances would be handled. So the best, for instance, we continue using amongst ourselves is if we own 3 lawnmowers and a lawnmower comes up missing, if that lawnmower is or is not, well, if it was purchased for more than $5,000, but eventually we have it and it comes up missing, what do we do? And so generally the idea is that all 3 branches of government would sit together in an executive session along with city attorney and your council to determine what to do. If it's not worth pursuing an individual who may have stolen an item, we wouldn't want to spend taxpayer money on doing that. So the idea and the goal would be to meet in executive session and determine that together, best use of taxpayer dollars. Other than that, we did not have that particular page of the policy before.
Counselors, questions, comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve ordinance 22-45.
A second.
Second.
Motion made by Counselor Patton, seconded by Counselor Gilbert. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Cindy Spalgeric,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Troy Patton.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0, and I want to thank Will for all his hard work on this, too.
Thank you.
And I would like to personally thank the clerk's office. I know as of, a year ago, we were hearing about not having functionality or not having all our policies and procedures in place. I appreciate you identifying the fact that this policy had lapsed and that we needed to address it, for taking the bull by the horns and getting the job done. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Our next item, ordinance 22-46, City of Westfield, Indiana, authorizing the issuance of the sale of general obligation bonds of the City of Westfield. This item had a council introduction on October 10th. It's up for a public hearing this evening and then adoption consideration. Jeremy, are you going to handle this introduction?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll take it again for the record. Jeremy Lawler with the city. The ordinance remains as introduced. The intent of the ordinance is to authorize the sale and issuance of general obligation bonds in the amount of $5,815,000. Those funds will be specifically used for the acquisition of a fire engine, as well as other road infrastructure projects like 181st Street and Wheeler Roundabout, the Cherry Street Bridge replacement, and then beginning of paying for the design of phase 2 of 191st Street, reconstruction and widening from Tomlinson Road to Grand Park Boulevard. And at that point, I'll open it up for questions from council.
Thank you, Jeremy. This item does require a public hearing, so we'll open the public hearing at 7:43. Kevin, any?
No cards.
No cards, thank you.
We'll just add, there's also a 2-year maturity date and a rate of not to exceed 7%, which will be bid out kind of in the usual course.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing at 7:44. Council questions? Comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion on ordinance 22-46?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 22-46.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made by Counselor Willis, seconded by Counselor Spalgeric. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Troy Patton.
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay. Next item is ordinance 2247, which is the associated ordinance appropriating the proceeds of the 2022 general obligation bonds. This had a council introduction on October 10th, requires a public hearing this evening, and will also be up for adoption consideration this evening. Jeremy, can you give us the background?
Sure, yes. I don't really have much more to add. This ordinance appropriates the proceeds of the bonds for the reasons that are described in the previous ordinance for fire apparatus and infrastructure dollars. Happy to answer any questions.
Great. Okay, again, which requires a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing at 7:45. Kevin, I assume no cards?
No cards.
No cards. Close the public hearing at 7:46. Any questions or comments, councilors? If not, can I have a motion to adopt ordinance 22-47?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Counselor Spoljarek, seconded by Counselor Fry. Cindy, please call the roll.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Next item is ordinance 22-49 redistricting. This ordinance had a council introduction on October 10th. We'll have a public hearing tonight and then up for adoption consideration this evening. Councilor Spoljarek, can you please explain this ordinance?
This is something that is required every 10 years after the results from the census have come back. In a nutshell, it would be nice to keep the districts as close to possible as they have been. The goal is to get even districts, and for us, given the precincts, that basically we need to have about 9,400 in each district, and that is impossible to do. That is a goal you shoot for. You also cannot have more than a 10% variance in those districts. So it's math, and I'm not good at math, but I did work a lot on this to be able to get our numbers to where they need to be in each district, as well as the contiguous property. And I know there has been questions from some, if you've seen that green district, that is District 2. Yes. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. District
That's
2.
two, yep.
Yes.
That's correct.
And there was an original question because those two were not lining up. As long as something is touching at a point, that is considered contiguous by the county and state. In our case, we did have a slight problem with the realignment of Spring Mill Road years ago. That line was not snapping, if you will, to the center line, both north and south of 32. We have talked to the state, and well, at least our attorney has, and we have now gotten their blessing that this would be considered contiguous. And so with that, this is the best route I could possibly find without splitting districts and getting even more complicated. And it requires a public hearing.
Thank you. With that, we'll open the public hearing at 7:48. Kevin, do you have any cards?
Nope, no cards.
Okay. Let's give it about 30 seconds here, and we'll close this public hearing. We'll close the public hearing at 7:49. Counselor, questions and comments regarding ordinance 2249 redistricting?
Mr. Chairman, I would say that it would be a lot easier if you could split precincts. State law prohibits that. We cannot split precincts. It might be a tidier map, but given all things that we faced with the having to get the numbers very close together, than 10%, I think Cindy has done a tremendous job getting that done. So I give credit to her.
I just echo Councilor Edwards' comments and thank Councilor Spoljarek for, she spent a tremendous amount of time working on this. Wasn't easy. It's sometimes people in the county and the state are not the easiest people to work with. But given this constraints, this is definitely the best job she could do, and I again applaud her for her efforts. So, any other questions, councilors? That being the case, do I have a motion of approval for ordinance 22-49?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Edwards, seconded by Councilor Willis. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Scott Willis.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Moving on to new business. We only have one item of new business this evening. It is basically the introduction of ordinance 22-50, City of Westfield creating a common council term limits and adding term limits for certain other city offices. This item has a council introduction this evening and would be up for adoption consideration on November 14th. I'm going to ask if Councilor Patton can kind of describe this ordinance and go through the thought process with us.
Sure. Yeah, so this is something that we've been talking about for quite a while with term limits. As often is the case, people talk about term limits, whether it be at the federal, local, or state level. I think in this instance, the term limits are pretty simple. It's 2 for the mayor, 2 for the city council, and 3 for the court treasurer's office. One of the reasons it's 3 for the court treasurer's office is because it is a little bit of a specific role to be played, and so therefore I put 12 years in for that office. One of the things, just to briefly discuss, is that some of the people some people are for it, some people are against it. A lot of people are for term limits until it has to do with them, and then they're against it, as often is the case. I hear that all the time. I'm generally for it, but against it at my level, because as I've heard from several people, that Westfield doesn't have enough talent in the city of Westfield to have people run for city council, clerk, treasurer, mayor. That's ludicrous. Actually, if someone has a great idea, the next person running will probably embrace that idea and further that or enhance it and maybe have a little bit different view. I think we're not the first to vote on term limits here in the state of Indiana, and I'm pretty sure we probably won't be the last. So with that being said, that's pretty much ordinance 22-50.
Any councilor comments?
I was queried by the Star last week. I was on a little business trip to New Palestine, and she said, "What do you think about that?" And I said, "Well, in my case, I'm not going to run again anyhow, so it doesn't make any difference. But if we do term limits, they have to be reasonable, and that requires some thought. I don't know that what Councilor Patton has introduced is not reasonable. I'm not saying that at all, but sometimes you can get kind of full of yourself and you think you know a lot, and maybe you don't know as much as you think you do. And it's good I think it's good for me to move out and let somebody else come in. And I think it would be good, everybody's got a different opinion about this, but I think if we do it, they have to be reasonable and it has to fit the office well for the city. Now, I don't have any real good answers about what that is, but they must be reasonable, I think. And whatever we do, I think in the end, this body would come up with a reasonable proposition.
Any other comments, Councilor?
I'll say something.
Okay.
And I've been wavering on this because I really do support the idea of term limits, and in fact, I won't be running again. I don't think that's news to anybody. But there is something that comes about. I'm serving with almost basically a brand-new council, except for Joe, and this is my 3rd term. So somebody in my position, that wouldn't happen. You wouldn't have somebody, serving in that regard with that institutional knowledge. And I guess the thing that starts to concern me is, especially with the way that we have these 4-year potentials of everybody new every 4 years, and then you can only have 2 terms, you really do run the risk of not having some kind of continuity there, and it probably makes it even trickier. So it's just something that I'm still wavering with in terms of how that would work, but I do, again, support the idea in general of term limits. But with the way we're all hired at the same time, again, I think that provides further complication.
Well, I agree with that observation. It's frustrating when we, our council last time explained to us that it's impossible for us to go back in time and change the rules so that we have staggered, council members. That just can't be done. We had a one-time shot at that when we moved from a town to a city. So at this point, we are stuck with having an election process that has everyone elected at the same time. It would have been nice to have staggered terms, but apparently that horse left the barn. So that being said, I'm typically in favor of term limits. Certainly when I think about what we're faced with on a national level, I sure as heck wish there would have been term limits in 20 years ago. But this is a local level, and at this point, I can just tell you that over the next couple weeks, I'm going to give it serious consideration, and I haven't decided yet which way I'm going to fall on this one, but I think it warrants some careful consideration. Councilors?
Yeah, this is one I think it's important we get community input. We don't always ask for that. I'm asking for that on this one because this will have a long-lasting, and I know how I feel personally. Maybe I would be following that that thing. I think I wonder if we could accomplish it in any other ways, but in general, I would probably be for it on a personal level. I don't know that that means it's the best thing to vote for. We have to be thoughtful. I do think for example, the clerk treasurer having a 3rd term, that's a thoughtful choice. I think that's good. I read Manny's comments today. So that's an issue that I think we need to take seriously. Is there an opportunity cost here legally and budgetarily for this? And if so, do we try to accomplish it in another way with some sort of pledge? I'm not sure. Something I would be willing to do. But Cindy, I think the same thing. So I have yet to ask Cindy about this, but I had told Troy that was on my to-do list was to talk to Cindy and Joe and find out how they feel about it. So I appreciate your candid comments for sure. But I'm just basically imploring the public, we'd like to hear from you. I think this is an important piece of legislation here and important ordinance. So please send us an email.
Yeah, I just a quick comment on maybe a couple of those things, and I think they're good comments. If you think about, we always talk about a servant's heart, right? And a servant's heart serves no matter whether we make the amount of money we make or not make our money. So what do we make? 15,000? What do we make?
I think it's 18.
Is it 18? Okay, 18,000.
Somebody told me it was 55.
55? Man, let's scratch this thing. Let's bump it up to 150 and I'll run indefinitely. But anyways, I think when you look at the people around the community that are interested in serving, people bring different ideas to the table. Even up here, I mean, we have a very different thought process and experiences. And, from years and experience, and even in being on boards and different things like that, I love to get, when we sit down, like, there's groups called YEO and YPO, if anybody's ever familiar with any of those type of things. It's the idea behind going to those groups with YEO and YPO is you see differing viewpoints. And those people kind of come and go, and you learn more and more with those different viewpoints. And if you have those same viewpoints over and over and over again, things don't change much. I have a certain view of how maybe certain things should be ran, and maybe my way's not right, and somebody else will have a differing view on that. The other side of that is, at the risk of complacency alone, in certain instances in the city of Westfield, and whether it be other places I'm not concerned with at this point, but in the city of Westfield, if I had a communications department that I could pay $300,000 to get myself reelected next year, that puts an unfair advantage to the person that's trying to be elected. And we've all seen it right here in Westfield. And here's the other thing. I've been offered money by the developers. I've never taken one dime. I could go out and raise $100,000 from developers to run the next time. That would give me an unfair advantage to the person that's running against me. And we have that going on right now. I mean, so it's like, you know, if you think about those things, and that's why, you know, in Evansville, the majority of the Democrats said, well, there are term limits that are called elections. It's not the same. Tell me that someone, whether it be at the local level, federal level, or state level, doesn't have the opportunity to raise money when they're in office and have people either vote for them or give them promises or favors. It happens. It happens on the local level, state level, and federal level. And this would end that, at least here in Westfield. And by the way, the ramifications are actually not long, because quite frankly, the next city council, if they don't like it, they can overturn it. So, anyways, that's it.
All right, hearing no additional comments then, we're going to think about that long and hard between now and our next meeting on November 14th. Okay, it's the time of the evening when we ask our guests and residents if they would like to address the council. Kevin, do you have any cards? No. I think we'd run more.
Thank you. For the record, my name's Ron Moore, 15868 Viking Commander Way, Westfield, Indiana. I was glad to hear you talking about term limits tonight. I'm neither for or nor against them at this point at a local level. However, I think they deserve to have an argument. But the one thing I want to make sure that you consider is the level of governance that we do have with the council and the administration, as well as the clerk treasurer's office, and the longevity and the amount of time it takes to get the experience to serve in those roles. One thing that came to mind, and I heard it mentioned, and that is coming to being able to stagger term limits. So I have an idea that I just wanted to throw out. I don't even know if you can do it, but you know, if you're going to go to this length of putting term limits in there, there's no reason why you can't stagger and choose what districts would be staggered for 1 term or 2 terms or 3 terms for the first election, and then after that, implement that way you would get staggered terms for some of the councilor seats. So that way you would be able to establish, excuse me, some kind of governance with some experience still sitting in those seats and guaranteeing that you won't lose all of the councilors at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Kevin, any other cards? No, hearing none. Clerk treasurer comments?
Oh, yeah, I just have one. Last week, our last council meeting, I just wanted to clarify with Dave Miller that there was, when he was talking about Ann's, ask for Ann's, what you've spent, he said 50,000. That was for 21 and 22. It was on the sheet that you were sent, and we're still working on yours. We wanted to put more information, so to avoid misinformation, we put more on it, more detail. So that was it.
Thank you, Cindy. City council comments. Councilor Spoljarek.
I will mention what happened at the last Planning Commission. I believe that was the 17th. That was one of the workshop meetings, and the Plat Committee, our new Plat Committee, we appointed the new people who will be serving, and an extra thanks to them. I believe they had their first meeting and training today. Is that true, Kevin?
Yeah, that's correct. We had no items of business, but we did a training session with all 5 members this morning.
Fantastic. And then we had a revised concept plan from Westfield Yard PUD proposal. So the commissioners spent a lot of time discussing that with the petitioner. And then Caleb presented the housing inventory that was done here as well. And again, an extra thanks to Caleb for all that work. That was it.
Thank you, Cindy. Any other comments, councilors? I've got just two quick comments to make. First of all, I got a chance to go to our Playhouse last week to attend an event there. And I have to tell you that the Westfield Playhouse is one of the nicest facilities I've ever been in. And I just want to encourage everybody here, if you get a chance, make sure you take the opportunity, go there, see a play, whatever event they're having. What a fantastic venue. What a great facility for our city. My second comment was just want to, again, go back and thank all the city administrative folks that we work with, the clerk treasurer and the council on the city budget. Budget is the most important thing that your city council does. It's what we're tasked with doing, and it's not an easy process. And I appreciate all the time and the thoughts, the calls I received, and as we went through that process. So thank you all. Mayor's not here this night, so we don't have any comments from him. So with that, I will adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you for.
I like that jacket, by the way.